Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Sara Klute Behn. I am your Right Self with Sarah, a lifestyle and longevity health coach. And I'm here today for our 4-part summer wellness program series. And this is part 3. This is all about being proactive in perimenopause. We are going to talk today about perimenopause and being proactive versus being reactive. You may already know a lot of this information, but I really hope that you take away a few things today. I'm going to cover what perimenopause actually is, reading some of the signals that can slowly creep up on us, being proactive versus reactive. So, that mindset shift that can help change things, and then those lifestyle strategies that can help us along the way as well. And then, of course, advocating for yourself, especially when it comes to going to your doctor. And then we'll also talk about some different options for medical care that might be helpful as well. So let's dive in here. Let's talk about the transition before perimenopause or before menopause. So, what is it really that's happening? And what we know now, or what we're learning more and more as this is being studied, is that perimenopause can last up to 10 years, which means that women can start noticing changes as early as their mid 30s, which of course is well before their last period. So, what's happening here is that the estrogen and progesterone are going to begin fluctuating kind of unpredictably. So, it's not like it's declining in a straight line down. It is going to kind of go up and down and just again fluctuate unpredictably. So that's why it feels like change can happen subtly and slowly, but sometimes these symptoms they're oftentimes missed or they're misdiagnosed. A lot of times we might hear from our provider that we're experiencing, for example, anxiety or depression all of a sudden, or sleeplessness. And so they might try to give us medication to help with that when the reality is it could be the beginning stages of perimenopause. So, what menopause is itself is simply one day. You go through 12 consecutive months without a period. And the day after that is where you have actually reached menopause. Everything until that is perimenopause. So, here's the hormone timelines that we're diving into a little bit today. In our mid to late 30s, we're looking at the progesterone beginning to decline. More into our early 40s, we're starting to see that estrogen starting to fluctuate up and down. And then by our mid 40s, symptoms are often peaking and feeling the most disruptive. And by our late 40s and into our early 50s, we start approaching menopause, and those cycles start to become more irregular and really unpredictable. And this matters because, as I mentioned earlier, it's not really about a straight line down or declining steadily. It is going to be a surge, can be a surge and a drop, and it could maybe go back up and back down and just kind of up and down. That's why symptoms, of course, are going to feel unpredictable as well. And just a reassurance that you're not losing your mind, that you are navigating a moving target and understanding the timeline, it can really help you recognize what's happening so that you can be proactive and not reactive. So, reading those flow signals, it might be the beginning of starting to wake up around 3 a.m. That is typically a time frame where we're experiencing a hormone shift in the middle of the night. It can be also some lighter sleep, some night sweats, and this can oftentimes be long before hot flashes actually really start. And then we're looking at our mood. Our mood can be more increased anxiety or irritability, having low moods, especially the week before you do get your period. And then metabolism. So, weight shifting into the abdomen without obvious diet changes or changes in exercise. It's kind of like, well, I'm doing the same thing. I'm still doing the same workouts. I'm still eating the same foods. Why is my body changing? And then the brain. Oh, this is the fun part. Word finding difficulty, forgetfulness, reduced focus, or what many of us will call brain fog. I cannot tell you how many times I have had somebody who I know pretty well and I can't think of their name. And so I think that that is the point where we sometimes feel like we are losing our mind. But the reality is when we are all on the same page and we can all understand that this is happening to all of us, it makes us feel like we're not alone in that. And then our energy. So maybe having a deeper fatigue than before, having longer recovery after stress, and just in general, less resilience overall. And then cycles. So we're having potentially shorter cycles, potentially heavier periods, skipped periods, and any shift from what was quote unquote normal for you. So, heading into our proactive versus reactive. So, being reactive is kind of like all of a sudden those symptoms are super disruptive, and all of a sudden we're having to react to them. And how we can be more proactive is recognizing those early signals and responding to them, maybe in a more thoughtful or proactive way versus feeling blindsided like, where did this come from? We can understand our hormonal timeline so that nothing really surprises you. And I have offered for those of you here in the chat, I have the proactive perimenopause guide. It has its own little tracking tool in there for you to keep a record of maybe a month or two that you can notice what's happening for you. And then again, back to reactive might be chasing relief, one symptom at a time. And I do feel like it's shifting in terms of our Western medicine. But sometimes this is what can happen in Western medicine is that we take a medication for one symptom and then we're getting another symptom or we're taking another medication. So we're kind of chasing those symptoms all over the place versus building a sustainable lifestyle that those habits can help with the symptoms before they actually peak. And then relying on what your doctors brings up versus coming to appointments with informed questions. I literally just had a friend actually say this to me. We were in a group chat and she said, "Hey guys, I was just at my annual appointment with my gynecologist and she didn't even ask me about perimenopause. Literally, like, did the exam, was in and out. And I said, unfortunately, I think that they really leave it up to you to be proactive to ask because if you aren't having any problems or concerns, they're just going to go through their 15-minute routine. That's all they have scheduled with you. And they're going to be in and out of there. Really coming to appointments with informed questions, which is also available on that guide. And then managing from a crisis mode rather than from wisdom. And proactive is going to be making choices from your wise self, not from a fear base. So, this is really where my background and my training really shines is this is the lifestyle strategies that actually help. I am certified in lifestyle medicine. There's 6 pillars in lifestyle medicine, but we're going to look today just mainly at 4 key areas, which is going to be nutrition, movement, sleep, and then your stress slash nervous system. When you consider nutrition, I know it's so funny because right now we feel like getting enough protein is a part time job. But really, what I encourage my clients to do is to look at each of their meals and are they getting 30 grams of protein at each meal? Ideally, that is what you're aiming for. And then reducing those ultra processed foods, anything that comes in a box, a bag, or with a barcode, just doing our best to reduce those. And then, of course, alcohol can really be problematic in this phase of our life where we used to be able to have a glass of wine or two. It might be a recovery that feels like, well, I only had one glass of wine last night. Why do I feel like garbage the next day? So, our body is definitely metabolizing differently as well. We can also look at how we can take in phytoestrogens, which is through our food. Using things like flaxseed, soy, and legumes are going to help bring up those phytoestrogens. And then really prioritizing fiber and gut health. And I can't emphasize this enough. And this is one of the things I also work with my clients on is making sure that they're getting enough fiber. And if they aren't, we work on supplementing it and of course looking at their gut health and how they can bring in more things like kombucha and kimchi and things like that that are going to help with your microbiome. Let's go over to movement now. When you are looking at movement, of course, walking and cardio is so important for your heart health and for your longevity of your lifespan. But I can't emphasize enough about how important it is in this time of our life to be doing strength training at least twice a week. If you can do 2 to 4 times, three being kind of that middle ground is great. But this is really where we're going to protect our bones, create lean muscle so that we are going to be able to, again, walk, get up, move, pick up grandchildren, whatever it is that we want to do to continue to feel like we are strong and that we can maintain our lifestyle the way that we want to maintain it. And of course, I'm a big advocate for yoga and stretching. This is also in line with meditation for that nervous system regulation. It's so vital to just continue to help break down that fascia and really help you continue to help move your body, learn how to breathe and breathe with your movements. All those practices are really, really important. And I would say, even if you can do it a couple times a week, that's great. Yoga or stretching, whatever you can do. And in terms of, it might be just something you do in your house, or it might be a class that you go to. And then recovery matters as much as the workout. So this is where we can start looking at like our heart rate variability, HRV. So that is about your recovery. And your recovery is going to be just as important as your workout. And if you want to know more about HRV, that's something that we can cover in our one-on-one 30-minute free session if you decide to participate in that. Let's talk about sleep now. Sleep is huge. I think that this is one of the overlying kind of umbrellas, if you will, to everything else. Having a consistent sleep and wake time becomes fairly non-negotiable. You might even notice, at least for myself, I could stay up later at night, but I still wake up sometime between 6 and 6:30 in the morning. And that is just how I operate. So what I know is that if I am up later, I'm always making time during the day for that 30-minute nap that I will need to kind of get me back on schedule. And then keeping with the sleep hygiene, still having a cool, dark room. And of course, those core temperatures are shifting during perimenopause. So bringing our temperature in our room or our house is also going to help with bringing down our core body temperature as well. And then, of course, limiting alcohol, limiting screens at least 90 minutes before bed, and big fan of magnesium glycinate. I interviewed Aaron McDonough recently, who's a functional pharmacist that I work with. His number one recommendation for a supplement was magnesium, specifically glycinate. I listened to another podcast today with another expert talking about the importance of women's health, and her recommendation number one was magnesium. So getting that and having that built into your routine is helpful as well. And then the stress and nervous system. So we talked a little bit about this under the movement part with yoga and stretching and mindfulness and meditation. But what we know is that chronic stress is going to be a real disruptor in terms of so many aspects of our life, because it can disrupt our sleep, which can disrupt our hormone balance. So things like doing breath work, I specifically subscribe to an app called Insight Timer. And within Insight Timer, you can look up basically anything, 10-minute beginner meditation. You can look up a guided meditation. You can look up nature sounds. But one of the other things that I subscribe to is iRest, which is a program that is specific to people who have PTSD. And I would say that I can kind of give a blanket statement that in some aspect, we probably have all experienced some sort of little t trauma in our life. If nothing else, if you're a mom and you have given birth to children, that is a little t trauma, because that is a huge impact on our body. Back to iRest, it is something that you can also look up under that app, that Insight Timer app. So even 10 minutes a day can be really, really helpful. And then boundaries. It's interesting. I work with my clients so often on boundaries as a wellness strategy, learning to say no or learning to not overgive constantly seems to be something that is very much shared among women in general. So, boundaries as a wellness strategy, not as a luxury, and tracking stress patterns alongside cycle patterns. What this means too is noticing that alongside your cycle patterns, if you're starting to feel more stress during certain times of the month. For me, I follow the moon cycles. So I know that it gets closer to the full moon, which oftentimes can also correspond with a period. And I know that at that point in time, I do my best to not engage in really deep conversations that could be challenging or maybe be a negative outcome, knowing that maybe I might be a little bit more on edge in that time frame. All right, so let's talk about tracking. Starting now, collecting data over maybe a 3 month up to a 6 month period is going to be your most powerful tool that you can take with you to a doctor's appointment. So, what to track? Your cycle length and flow changes. So, anything that's different from your personal normal. Any sleep quality and waking patterns. So, especially if you're waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., I will say for me, it is definitely a thing that happens for me the week before my period. I have a tendency to wake up at that time. So noticing that pattern, any mood and anxiety patterns, noting where in your cycle that is also falling in terms of any changes or shifts. And then your energy levels, noticing morning, midday, evening. And it's interesting because now that I work at home, one of the things that I've always done for myself is I have always meditated in the afternoon. I used to work the same hours that my kids were in school. So oftentimes I would pick them up at 3 o'clock and come home and I would do my meditation. But being at home full time, I can now just kind of lean into those energy levels. So, for example, today I did my meditation before this program, and that felt really good to me because I knew that I was going to need that little boost of energy today for this program. And then that brain fog, tracking the brain fog in those episodes, just noticing if there's any frequency or triggers that you are noticing. And then any hot flashes or night sweats, noticing the time of day, the duration, if there's any triggers. And then advocating for yourself. These are some questions to ask your provider. And again, it's in the guide as well. So you'll have access to this, but feel free to take a picture of the screen if you'd like to have it on your phone. But you can ask your provider about, could my symptoms be related to perimenopause? What testing do you recommend at my age and stage? And oftentimes they will say, none, because it tends to fluctuate. It can be expensive. I just would really encourage you to kind of push back on that a little bit and see what you could have covered by your insurance. And if you're not getting the answers you want or need, I would encourage you to look for another provider. And I'll give you a list of those here coming up as well. What are my options? So, from lifestyle to hormonal or otherwise. And this is where also someone like myself, a health coach, can come in and help you with the lifestyle and support you on your journey and walk beside your doctor in that way. So, you're getting your medical advice from your physician, but also you're getting the support that you need from your health coach. And then how do you approach hormone therapy, and asking your provider about how they approach it and what is right for you? I would really encourage you that if your physician says that they want to put you on a birth control pill, that would be an alarm to me. That would be a red light to me. I would be very cautious of that and really check into and do your research on what it is that you want to use, because there are low level, like for example, in that right hand column, you'll see estradiol. Estradiol is a cream that you can buy as inexpensively as $13 to use as a topical application. And that is going to give you the benefits that you need without going into a synthetic birth control pill. And then the last question is, who do you recommend if if you're looking for a specialist in menopause medicine. And again, I'm going to share a few today, but of course, if you have a great rapport with your physician, please ask them as well who they might recommend if they are not a specialist in menopause or perimenopause. And then the tests for you to know about or know more about is going to be that FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone test. That is going to help you understand where your elevated levels are and understand where you're at kind of in perimenopause. And again, everything can fluctuate, but sometimes it's good just to have a snapshot. That estradiol, which is going to measure estrogen, which is helpful as a baseline. What we do know about also the thyroid is that the thyroid can mimic many perimenopause symptoms. So getting a thyroid panel can be very helpful. And then, even though we are women, of course, and we primarily produce estrogen, we also produce testosterone. And testosterone is going to affect your libido, your energy, your muscle, oftentimes your hair. So, just understanding that you can also get a test done for your testosterone, especially if you're noticing changes in those areas. And then we talked about magnesium, but a couple of other really important supplements to use are also vitamin D and B12. So noticing if you fall low in that when you get that tested, that is also going to affect your mood, your energy, and your cognition. And I will take it a step further and encourage you to get a methylated B vitamin that's going to help you with the absorption rate as well. And actually with vitamin D, I would also recommend a dropper, like a liquid vitamin D over a pill. So, as promised, some providers here in Iowa. So I listed, of course, myself. I would be remiss if I didn't offer that. But also, I am really good friends with Tracy Havlick Harridge, who is a hormone coach. And she's part of my program this year called Your Wise Year. And Tracy specifically works with women in this whole space of hormones. And she's an athlete, she's been a lifelong athlete. So her story started from basically from being a female athlete and trying to manage her period and then going into her 40s and 50s and managing perimenopause. So I really encourage you to follow her on social media, reach out to her, check out her website for any resources that you might find valuable or helpful. Trainwithfire.net is her website, and Train with Fire is her handle on social as well. I talked a little bit about Aaron McDonough. He's a functional pharmacist at Towncrest Pharmacy in Iowa City, towncrest.com. I work closely with him and I send a lot of people to him. He has testing available, he has supplements available, and he can talk to you about the medications and then how to bring in supplements and kind of do that all safely. And then 3 different providers. I personally have never gone to them, but I know of people who have gone to Prime Life Iowa, and I know of people who have gone to Yoast Wellness Center. I found Virtual Med Iowa also in my research. So those are 3 different providers that are going to be very specifically able to help you with your perimenopause journey. For example, if your doctor is not well versed in this process, I would really encourage you to do your research and reach out possibly to one of these clinics or another clinic that you find to be helpful for you. This is also where my Thrive method comes in. We look at the T or tuning in. We're going to listen to our body's early signals before it becomes a crisis. And then H is honoring your whole self. Perimenopause is a physical, emotional, mental, spiritual journey, and just understanding that these shifts, we kind of don't feel like ourselves for a period of time. And what I've been told is that on the other side of it, when you're fully through to menopause, that you kind of reclaim all of that. You feel better. But during this time, this is a great time to really reflect on your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual parts of yourself. And you could do that with me as a coach. The R is your regulate and restore. Nervous system care is hormonal care because they are interconnected. The I is integrate sustainable habits. Small, consistent choices are going to outperform dramatic overhauls. You'll often hear me say, make the next best choice for yourself. one decision at a time, not a complete overhaul, going to be the way to go. Vitality and values, reconnecting with what energizes you and not what drains you. So this is where boundaries comes in. This is where joyful movement comes in. This is where doing things that you really are passionate about. So it might be something that you're like, I used to do XYZ and I really miss it. I miss how I feel when I do it. For example, I had a client that she used to make greeting cards and she's like, it brought me so much joy. And she's like, I loved doing it. Well, how can we bring that back? So I worked with her on how can she bring that back so that she's doing something creative and something that brings her joy. And not only that, it was bringing other people joy because she was sending them these beautiful cards. And then lastly, embodied empowerment. So moving from fear and your body's changes to trusting your body that while this has been something that's been going on for women since the beginning of time, we are understanding more and more, able to help women through this process and just truly trusting that it will be okay, that we'll make it through to the other side. So I'm going to actually jump over to this screen here and I will make this smaller so I can see if there's any questions anybody has. If you want to put them in the chat. And ultimately, I will just leave you with a few quick things here while I'm waiting for any questions in the chat. Again, thank you for being here. I am so grateful that you took the time for yourself. If you visit my website, you will see that there's a free e-guide, free human design and wellness report available to you. The Letting Go to Grow course is available for a small fee as well. And then if you're curious about just meeting with me and taking advantage of that 30-minute free session, I would love to connect with you, help answer any questions that you have from today's program or otherwise. And don't forget to download your free perimenopause guide on how to be proactive. And then, of course, the recording will be sent out from today as well. And it really means the world to me to have even more women have access to this information. So please, please forward it to your friends, to your family members, to the women in your life that you feel could really use this information. Lastly, last but not least, coming up in our last wellness series event will be on July 15th at 12 p.m. Central, and that we will talk all about supplements 101. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. I'm going to close again with saying thank you for being here and taking this time for yourself. Take care, and I'll see you soon.